Hello, dear listeners. This is Greg Oliver, and welcome to another episode of Being Independent, the show that talks about how to be independent in the music industry in the year 2022, which is more than halfway over now. My gosh. Today's episode is about recording music and protecting your recordings. There are lots of reasons we record music. And one of those reasons is to get music out to our fans, make it available to people. And in doing so, we need to be able to protect it. So I thought I would talk about both things in this episode. Before we get into any of that, though, I wanted to thank, once again, as always, AlternativeTwist.com for airing this show every Friday faithfully at 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This particular show is broadcast over the air, which means it's done once, and then it's gone. So a lot of people that have missed shows for various reasons have contacted me about getting copies to previous shows. So because of the volume of those requests, I decided just to set up a web page on my band's website dedicated to the podcast where anybody that wants to can get back episodes. So to do that, go to www.wearejackstrong.com, and in the menu there at the top of the page, there'll be a menu that says Being Independent Podcast. Just click on that and you can go and get a little more information about the podcast itself. And there's a link there that will take you to back episodes. So enjoy. Everybody knows we like to start the show off with some music. So here's some new stuff. This is from Ellie Cope and it's called Tech Week Love.
Let's build a set for us to live, all sentimental. I will build us a cardboard bed. Tell your man you won't be home for at least a couple of days. Hang the lights, I'll get the pain. Took this way too far. Watch the blood burst all over my heart, all over my heart, all over my
heart. Bear with me here for a minute. When we talked about songwriting, all of our listeners are familiar with songwriting as far as sitting down and trying to write something, but we made it into a bigger thing because in an original music band, you have to do songwriting kind of on a collaborative basis. And when we talked about rehearsal, I know everybody knows what it means to practice at home, but rehearsal is a collaborative effort where you're working together to form a bigger thing. Then we talked about booking and social media. And there we ran into these skills that nobody thinks about when they're starting a band, which are creating a network and selling and creating social media content, which is some kind of art. And that's kind of brand new to people too. So we've already started seeing a lot of things that are new to musicians that want to participate in the music business in an original music band. And some of those things seem very unmusical and we're not very talented in them and we have to learn how to do them. Then we talked about putting on a show, creating a show that's specific to your band and your music and your audience and your personalities in the band, which is a very personal and very strongly collaborative activity. Again, these are new skills for people that basically just thought they were going to be playing music, writing and playing music with people, which sounds pretty fun. And that's kind of why we produce this show. And now we come to this episode about recording, which is a technical endeavor that allows you to capture these songs that you write in order to distribute them or in order just to listen to them yourself and practice to them. I'm not going to talk about how you set up mics or what plugins you use or what kind of DAW is best suited for you or if you should go with Mac or Windows. I mean, there's a million different sources for all of this information, and it's just too personal to fit into one of these radio shows. On the other hand, we can talk about why you record and what you can learn from recording and what to expect from a recording session, and we can talk to a professional recordist. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how to protect legally the things that you record, how to distribute them, and how to collect royalties from them. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to talk to a professional recordist, and we're going to talk to a guy who's a band leader that is published and copyrighted and distributed a lot of recordings. And then I'm going to chime in a little bit more, and that's our show for today. So I hope you enjoy it, because recording is one of the things that sets us apart from our cover band companions. This is something that we do on our own. It's not just for promo. We intend to sell our original music. I mean, that's the first thing we think of when we think about making a recording these days, isn't it? That we're going to sell it. There are a lot more reasons to record than just to make a record to sell. Let me give you some examples. In my band, we are Jack Strong. The songwriters record drafts of the various parts of a song, or the parts that become a song, when they're just ideas, and keep files of them so that they can put them together with other parts until they have a set of chord progressions that sound like a verse and a chorus and a bridge and whatever, until they really form a song. In my house, I have kind of a mini studio set up persistently, so I just go in there and record them on a DAW, which, by the way, is DAW, and that's an abbreviation for Digital Audio Workstation. The one I particularly use is called Reaper. And in Dan's house, he doesn't have a studio set up all the time, so he'll sometimes record his stuff on his phone. So that's the level of recording we're talking about there. So that's the first use of recordings, and that's to record thoughts and organize them later for the songwriting process. The next kind of recordings we make are demos. That's a song demo. So once I've organized all the parts and written some lyrics, and I have verses, choruses, and a bridge, I'll turn on a click track on the DAW and play the whole song through on either the bass or guitar or keyboards or whatever I'm starting the demo with. The click track allows me to make sure that everything's played at a consistent tempo throughout, so that when I add the drums with a drum plugin that I use, the drums will fit right in and everything will sound like it's playing together in time. Not that it matters, but I usually play the bass part first, and then the guitar or keyboard part, and then sing a lead vocal over the top of that, and then I'll add the drums, and then I'll add harmony vocals. So that's the way the demos come together. Dan, on the other hand, will sometimes use the drum machine and a looper and play the rhythm guitar part into the looper so that he can come back and play the lead part over it, and he'll record a vocal with that. The purpose of these demos is just to explain to the other guys in the band where we're starting with this song, what the idea is and what the author or the initial idea about the feeling of the song would be. We all know it's going to change from there. They never stay the same, and that's good because we all put our input in on it. And there's a lot of things that change it, like when we start playing it out live and we see how people react, we might change how long the lead solo goes on or how long the intro is, or any number of things that we can change about the structure of the song. So that's another purpose for recording, is to communicate the initial ideas for a song to the other band member. And the reason we choose this way, instead of just for instance, playing it for them at a rehearsal and then starting that way, is that we've learned over time that rehearsal time is precious, and anything that a band member can do on their own at home to be completely up to speed with how the song is going to be played should be done at home. At the end of a rehearsal, I send out a list of everything we're going to rehearse at the next get-together so that everybody knows exactly what parts they're expected to know at the next rehearsal. It's important to know that there is more than one way to convey the idea about how a song is supposed to go to your bandmates. For instance, instead of recording, you could write charts, either notation or tablature or chord charts, and hand those out. And that's a good way to go if you're playing with musicians that can read charts. And if you can write them well enough so that you can cover all the different instruments in your band. I used to write charts for everybody, but I've settled on this recording method because I like to put the recording together at the beginning because I like to hear how all the parts mesh before I send it out to anybody. Also, I have found writing drum charts to be very difficult for me, so I don't have a good way to convey my feeling of the rhythm to the drummer without a recording. A third kind of recording we make are rehearsal recordings, which are just exactly as they sound. Everybody comes to rehearsal knowing what their parts are, and we record the rehearsals. Our setup has grown more sophisticated over time, but I will tell you that fundamentally, we used to use a 6-channel Zoom recorder that picked up guitar, bass guitar, a mono line from the PA, so you got all the vocals there, a kick, a snare, and a room mic. As time went on, we bought a more expensive 20-channel recording unit, and now we record very much the same way they would in a studio. For rehearsals, we use electronic drums. So that's a left and a right coming from there. Then there's guitar, 3 vocals, and bass. So we don't use all 20 channels in the rehearsals as a general rule, but as we add instruments or do other things, or perhaps rehearse with a acoustic drum kit, we have all the capability we need to be able to record all that stuff. What we focus on as far as recording at rehearsals are new songs that are still in the changing process, because sometimes you'll make 3 or 4 changes in a song at a single rehearsal, and people have different memories of what got changed. So we could settle all that argument about what actually got changed with these recordings. And a great side benefit that comes from this is you can study over and over exactly how you played a lick or exactly how you played a part. And you can clean things up. You can hear when your muting wasn't good. You can hear when you were hesitant, when you fell out of time, all those kind of things. And you can work on those during your weekly practice so that the next rehearsal, you don't make those same kind of mistakes. And I take all the tracks from the 20-track recorder and dump them into my DAW Reaper and get a great deal of practice in editing and mixing tracks, which is invaluable. It will allow me to grow as a recordist and mixer, which is something I didn't think I needed to know, but someone in the band has to know it, and it ought to be me. Okay, that's enough of that for a minute. We'll catch back up after another song. This is one by Hillary Nelson, and it's called Feel Good Time.
It's my feel good time all the day. No way you can bring me down right now. No, 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 no. It's my only time to say that I love you so, and I hope you know that I see you struggling, yeah. I see it coming to fruition. I keep wishing, but the mission keeps on getting delayed, yeah. I got a course of action, losing traction. Feels like I'm maxing my potential, but it's slipping away, yeah. And I don't know what you see in me, but it's so hard to believe.
So that's a few things that we use the recordings for, to organize our thoughts, to make the demo so that we can share our first concepts of a song with the other band members, and to record new songs in rehearsal so we have a record of changes, or to record existing songs so that we can analyze our performance and get it down really tight. The fourth category of recordings that we make are recordings that are performance recordings that we use for promotional purposes. When I say it's a performance recording, what I mean is the band is all together in one place and we play through the song. It might take a couple of takes to get it as perfect and as tight as we want, but because we've been careful all along to be well rehearsed, we know the songs and we play them through well the first time, usually. But this is an important thing to mention. We record all of our parts direct, which means the only microphones that are open are the vocal microphones, and so there's minimal bleed as far as the instrument tracks go. If one instrument makes a slight mistake, a tiny mistake, then it's easy to punch that in after recording and fix it. The band made a decision that the demo recordings don't have to be perfect. They're just used to convey the idea of a song to our social media followers. They are samples of our music that they can share with their friends and hopefully inspire them to come see us at a show. And this is where all that practice that we get in editing and mixing comes in so handy, is to make good, clean recordings for our fans to enjoy. These aren't the recordings that we sell. These are recordings that we give away. For us, making recordings that are for sale should be done in a studio, at least partially. For instance, for our first 14 singles, we recorded the drum tracks, guitar tracks, bass tracks, and a single vocal track all at once in a studio. And then we brought all those tracks home and mixed them and edited them, and probably ended up re-recording about 20% of the guitar and bass tracks, and then adding harmony vocals and percussion and stuff at home. It was a trade-off decision. We were financing it ourselves, so we wanted to save some money on the studio time. We didn't want to scrimp on the quality. We loved the quality of the drum tracks that we got, and most of the other instruments as well. The reason we had to re-record things had a lot more to do with our performance than the ability of the studio to capture our performance. So we learned not to try to record quite so many songs in one day before. 14 is a lot. So that's my experience with recording with this band in 2022. The last time I recorded anything for sale was in 1994, and I will tell you that was a completely different experience and irrelevant to anything that's happening now. We recorded those 14 singles at Amplified Studios in Carlsbad, California. And in the crew of people that helped us that day was a young man named Gabe DeGrazio. I knew that we needed to talk to a professional, so I made an appointment to talk to Gabe. I called him, and this is what he said.
Hi, my name is Gabe.
Tell us where you work, Gabe.
I work out at Amplified Studios in Carlsbad, California.
You work there as the studio manager and chief engineer. Can you tell me what a studio manager does?
Studio manager at the Amplified Studio. That means that I look after all the recording project, and I basically make sure that whatever comes out of the studio sounds good. Mostly I'm the lead recording and mixing engineer.
And do you produce?
I do, yes. It's a case-by-case negotiated thing with the artists.
Can you tell me about the decision an artist might go through between the decision to self-produce or to use you as a producer?
Some artists come in with a clear idea of what they want, and I just put my technical abilities into service on how to get to that sound that they want. At other times, they come with a song idea more open, and they are more open to have my input on how to achieve that particular emotions that they want in the song. It's all about really the song. I try to get the best out of it.
What is the criteria a band should use for making a decision whether or not they want to record in a studio or record on equipment at home?
Well, recording with equipment at home, especially in the past years, has become very cheap and convenient. And so I reckon that every band would benefit to some degree to have somebody in the band who knows a little bit about recording. and that will give the opportunity to record things and have a grasp, have an idea about how they will start to sound. But there are some limitation, and I mean the technology that makes make accessible to all people to start recording at home. But still, at the same time, if you want to buy, an exquisite piece of gear, is still $4,000 a channel, which means that it still retains a sort of a value against the digital. I mean, the advent of digital have opened a lot of possibilities, and you can get it to sound good, but the studio, especially if it's done with purpose and thoughtful, it still has the ability of making something that sounds superior. And that's of course certain degrees. Like if you want to record shakers, more than welcome to do that in the room. If you're going to record like overdub and something that is not critical for the production, feel free to do it at home. Actually, we encourage this type of collaboration. But some other stuff, like if you want a good recording of a drum kit, that things needs to be in a big room, because all loud instrument requires big space to dissipate the waves, right? Or if you want to record a compelling vocals and you really want to get the best sound quality you can, you might need to be trying a few different microphones to find the one that pairs with your vocals better. And then you might want to, try a tube preamplifier and a couple of transistor preamplifier and see how they sound, and try a couple of hardware compressors to get the best out of it. Although, don't get me wrong, the performance will always rule, and it's way better to capture a good performance with terrible gear than a terrible performance with great gear.
Let me recap what I think I heard you say. A studio is preferable if the instrument you're recording, like a drum kit, needs the room to breathe, or if the instrument is critical to the song that you're putting together, and it's an acceptable gamble to try to record these things at home if you have the correct equipment to do that work, and if you have somebody who knows something about, now you said know something about recording, but I assume that you're also adding into that things like mic placement and everything about recording.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, like the musicians, and I say that as a musician, they make less and less and less money over time with how the market works now. So but at the same time, recording studio, it's not as straightforward as it might seem like, right? And I remember from my first recording experience and what I was thinking I was about to do and what my friends think that I should do. Like they think, oh, okay, you go to the studio, you play the song, and off you go. It's all ready. Well, it doesn't work exactly that at that level. I think about songwriting and arranging and producing and recording and mixing and mastering are all different stages of the same process. Occasionally, when you want to record band and say, yeah, sure, we'll rehearse all the songs, but occasionally that translates in really reinforcing mistakes, because it's not clear what it will work in recorded music unless you record it and then you hear it back. Because a bass player which plays a lot of show and it's great on stage and it's rocking out on stage doesn't realize that maybe when you go to recording it's inconsistent with the timing. The same work for drummer who once hit it with a rim shot and the next hit it's a center hit, and then one is strong and some hit the snare way louder when they are playing on the ride, and when they go back to the hi-hat, all of a sudden the level of the snare drops because they don't have that that stroke to hit the snare at the same at the same strength. So this is all very small detail, but from the very beginning of the songwriting, we should use the music to manipulate the emotions of the listener. And good songwriters do that instinctively. They have different harmonic rhythm when it comes to the chorus and pre-chorus, and they change the chord, they change the rhythm, they add and remove instruments, they create contrast, they create motion, forward motion, and these are very, very important elements in music production. And the more we defer decision, the more we are basically dumping this decision towards the end of the process, which is the mixing, when one goes and mix all the tracks and realize there's a lot of musical problems that don't work as well as they should.
What Gabe just shared with us here is just, I can't tell you how important it is. Let's unpack Gabe's wisdom after another song. This one's called I've Been Thinkin' by Jack Strong. I've been thinking about the time. I've been thinking about my prime. But like you said, the things we dread, they were right there in front of our eyes. I've been thinking you were right. I've been thinking, but I couldn't see the light. We were undaunted in what we wanted, but knowing us, that's no surprise. I've been thinking all along.
I've been thinking.
Was it you that made me strong?
I've been thinking.
Good or bad, we wove a web.
I've been thinking.
Together still, we'll move ahead. Let's unpack it. He said, if you view what you're doing as these separate processes that are divorced from one another, then you may be tempted to believe that songs are done at some early point in the process, and then you rehearse, play them out a bunch of times, and then maybe you record them. And Gabe is saying that thought is flawed because the real process is making a song, and it's all different steps in the same process. So in episode 1, when we said that we write the song and then we take it to rehearsal and then we add other parts to it, we change it around a little bit, and then we take it out and play it for people, and maybe we see how they react to it. Maybe we think, that solo should be longer, or we should cut the solo, or whatever the crowd tells us about the song. We should incorporate that, because otherwise we're deferring all these decisions that keep it from being great to the very last minute, to when we're mixing, and suddenly we want to mix a great song that we didn't record great parts for. That's one thing. The second thing I heard was, take care and be a craftsman when you're recording yourself playing your instrument. There are things that come up sonically when you're listening back to recordings that you don't notice during performance. The example that Gabe gave was a bass player who's not completely locked in with the drummer, his timing's off a little bit, or a drummer who's an inconsistent hitter, sometimes hits rim shots and sometimes hits center hits, and it sounds inconsistent. I remember early in my career being sat down by a producer, when there was a producer there, and being told that my muting, I play bass, and being told that my muting was terrible, that there were all kinds of notes ringing out and that was ruining the recording. And I listened to it and he was right. And that was hard. I argued in my mind, and probably out loud, I'm ashamed to say, about it not being my fault. But it was. And he was a very seasoned guy, so we sat down at the desk, at the console, and we just played a loop of the song over and over, and I played the bass part, and he would tell me when to mute. He'd show me. And it was nothing I didn't know how to do. I just wasn't doing it. It was just lazy. So I did that, and I practiced it a lot. I practiced it at home that night, and then the next day when I went back to the studio, the next time I went back to the studio, we re-recorded it, again, sitting at the desk, and I was able to play the whole thing pretty much flawlessly. And Gabe is advocating that you do just that kind of thing for yourself. In other words, record your rehearsals, record your playing, and listen to how you're playing. Listen to how you are playing. Are you executing your instrument properly? Can you do that in the studio? Also, have you and the rest of the band spent any time and had any discussion about how you want the song to sound? I mean, that kind of comes out when you're playing and rehearsing, but have you had any real conversation about it? Because if not, you're probably not going to record the material that you need to get it to sound that way.
Now to find new ways to make the song unique in a sense, but really go into details and don't defer this decision when you are in the studio, because that will be expensive.
There's always been a tremendous amount of hype published about how some bands just go in the studio and just knock these songs out. Just go in, they don't know what they're going to do, they write one, they play it, and it becomes an instant classic. And I'm pretty sure that's always written by PR people. But even if it's not, the odds of that happening often are not in your favor. So you need to do the hard work and study the song and study your playing and be happy as a group with it before you go into the studio.
That's right. That's a lot of misconception now, especially nowadays. We go back still with the digital thing that, we can fix things after. You know, you can have a lousy recording and then you can fix and mix and butcher it after and beat it into shape. Yes, you can, but that's very frustrating for the engineer. Like, if you get things right, it will sound great.
You walk into the studio hoping that you're going to knock it out of the park. Great takes. You're all practiced, you're rested, you're ready to go. And the scenario that Gabe just told us about is the scenario when you're walking out, hoping that they can fix your mistakes and that nobody will notice how poorly you played. That's a completely different scenario. So when he's talking about all the different steps for preparation, that's what he's trying to avoid. And I asked Gabe how he would help a band avoid that situation, help them to knock it out of the park, so to speak, the way they first wanted to.
So if I had a band coming here to record, I will want to see it, and of course we came to a certain amount of trust. So they trust that I want to get the best out of their song, right? And I want them to feel good about it, and I invite them to rehearse here, and so we can work on the song and really have a set of extra ears. In that case would be me, and I just put my input, because it's only have somebody who knows about music and it's external from the band, a set of fresh air that never listen to the song. You know, the band is attached to the song because they want to record it, so they probably rehearse it 1,000 times, hopefully, and they are very, very they know how the sound, they are attached to it. I'm not attached to any song. Like, I listen to the song and I point out how it makes me feel, and I analyze things about arrangement and how that can, enhance things and create more excitement and contrast. And definitely rehearse and really look closer to the part, like work for 2-3 hours on a single song and really go into, try bad ideas, try good ideas, try weird stuff that you might think they never work, but really a band should go into all the corners to find out how the pattern of the kick and snare should be together with the bass.
So starting from the beginning of the chain, the songwriter wrote it, and then the band was able to give all their inputs and try all the different things they wanted to try, and they came collectively to a decision on how the song was going to go. And then they went out and they started playing it for people, and they noticed the reactions of people and maybe modified the song a little bit to fit. Well, this is Gabe wanting to be the set of ears after that. And if there's more suggestions, if there's more things to try, if it's not been exhausted yet, you'd like to take a couple of hours and work on the song and see that we've hit it all. Obviously, it's going to take a lot longer if you haven't already wrung it out. So what does the band need to tell Gabe in order to get the most out of the recording experience with him?
I generally ask for previous recording stuff that they have.
Okay.
So I can listen to what they've done before and what style are they in. And then I simply ask for, I generally ask what is their vision, and they generally talk and I listen, and I might ask them for references of other bands that they like the sound and they try to achieve, so I can have a finished product to use as a reference, so I understand the type of tones that they are going to look for. And but then in the studio we offer pre-production meeting. They are for free and they have no obligation, and they come here and we chat and we have a tour in the studio, and we listen to their music and try to think of what would be the best way to get there in the best cost-effective way. And that's it. There's really no magic formula. It's at the end we really want to, value the human connection of the process. It's making music together. That's something beautiful, and it should be a fun process.
The band should tell you. The band should tell you about what kind of sound they're looking for, and they can do that by supplying a reference. They can tell you what kind of need to tell you about what kind of sound they have, and they can do that by supplying a recording of themselves. How about what they need to tell you about equipment?
It really depends if they know what they want. Some know, and they're more than welcome to bring in their amplifiers, their drum kit, whatever. Some other have have an idea of the sound, but they don't know how to get there, and that opens a whole other a chapter, if you want. That they're welcome to use all the gear, but generally, if I'm aiming for a sound, I have pretty much a good idea already what to use to get close to that sound. Of course, if somebody say I want to use my amplifier, you're more than welcome. I mean, I'm not going to argue with that. But no band sounds like any other, but most of the band we work with, they want to fit in a specific pockets. We have some stylistic conventions, so you want to use a Mesa amplifier with a Gibson if you're aiming for a specific sound. It's all pairing things, and that's pretty. I really in preparation. If I can add something, the band should make sure that their gear is all in order. They should take the guitars to be professionally set up and have good intonation, have a good brass. Everything should be spot on. Like
new strings. Tell the bassist to change his strings.
I would never say that to a bassist unless they have algae growing on. That changes by engineer. I mean, no, not all engineers will tell you what I'm telling, because we all do things in a bit differently. I find it's much easier to work with strings that are not brand new, but it's been on for a week or two, so they not keep losing tune, and they are still fairly brilliant, but not too much.
Right.
Because if you have brand new strings, by the end of the day, the brilliance of the string will be different. So if you do overdubs, you will have something that you record early on in the day to sound very bright, and then if you punch in something, you will have something that sound dull in between bright takes. So that's something to keep in mind.
How about if a guitar player wants to use his stomp boxes, his effects pedals?
Okay. Pedals are very useful in the studio, some of them. It depends if we're talking about, using a tube screamer to push the front end of the amp when I need to solo. I'm all for that. If we use effects, EQ, that's great. As long as we use it with purpose and just not because we have it, I probably wouldn't record somebody that comes in with a digital amp, because that's not getting the best sound it possibly can. So I had some mentors while I was in the school, and they would say that they were spending a lot of time working hard, finding the right tone before they record.
Uh-huh.
And that makes a whole big difference, because the tone influence how you're playing, and how you play influence the tone. So if you get the tone right, when the artist is performing and the tone is inspiring, it will perform better than having an tone that we can fix after. These are very important, but it's already a process from the songwriting to the finish line of getting the things as best as you possibly can, knowing that perfection doesn't exist. But it's like an inch by inch. You want to get the tone just right, because every time you modify the sound, you are somehow degrading it. Somehow you are introducing artifacts, and that's especially true in the digital world.
It's time for another song, and I can't imagine anything more appropriate than playing one by Gabe himself. Now, he didn't record this. I saw the video of him playing this live in a studio. So this is him singing and playing guitar. It's credited to a band called Prime, and it's called Believe Me.
What I left behind, what I clarify at night. 'Cause I don't believe in what I felt, nor believed in what I had, and I dream of you tonight. And it's on and on, and it's on and on.
Let's say I was going to play a guitar solo and I knew that I wanted delay on it. I was committed to having delay. Would you want me to play it using a stomp box and having the delay hit tape, or would you prefer that I play it dry and you add the delay digitally afterwards so that you could tweak it and get it just right?
I will use your stomp box as a delay, so we can start and we can find out right away if it sounds good. And if it sounds good, we record it, so we have no choice to second guess that. I think that's it's a lot of making music effectively, it's also be able to make decision and move on, because otherwise you'll never finish.
The reason I gave that particular example was because I've been on both sides of that argument. It's a tough one. You commit to a sound, and that's the sound that hits tape. But then when you're mixing and you go, that's not quite an eighth note. The repeat is not.
Oh yeah, it's not synced with the tempo.
Yeah, it's not right. And you know that if you're going to if you had done it in the box, you could you can fix it.
Yeah, there are solutions to that though, because nowadays you can sync MIDI devices, which most of those delay have some sort of MIDI access, or at least the high-end one. Now you can actually sync it with the click of the DAW, so you can line that up. And of course there's a risk. That's why you kind of have to figure that out earlier on.
I asked Gabe what a band should expect from a recording session.
So they should ultimately looking for as an experience for improvement and to learn something out of it. You'll come out a better musician than you walk in, because if I'm playing live, every mistake goes in the air and they leave. But if it's recorded, it's there forever. And working with an engineer or a producer, they will point you, hey, this palm muting needs to be right on the spot on the time, and we'll sit there half an hour to get it right. That is something that sinks in. You really go and work and find the corners that are not quite right, and you improve on them. The next recording, you don't have to work on that. You have other stuff to work on, because hopefully you challenge yourself in different ways.
So when somebody comes to you and says, how long will it take to mix my song? Is that one of those questions like how long is a piece of string?
It really depends, and we go back again to what I said before. It's the same process. So if the recording has a lot of, first of all, it's the number of tracks, right? Mixing something with 50 tracks is not the same as mixing something with 8 tracks. Of course, but then if the recording was particularly problematic and there's a lot of editing, which some people include as part of the mixing, but it's not really, like selecting good takes, selecting the microphones you want, selecting and cutting and crossfading, that's not part of the mixing, that's editing, it's in between recording and mixing. But if that could be very tedious. Generally, I would say as an average, will be a day worth of work. Let's say 8 hours of work to mix a full song. If it's a singer-songwriter with one guitar and one vocal, that's fine. That won't be more than 3-4 hours. And of course, the more instrument and the more problematic are the recording, the more time it will take to beat it into shape, in a sense. So if the record is doing well, the mix is a breeze to do. It's really have to mix it. You don't have to fix. It's very different. So we want to get the recording good to be a starting point. That when you listen, it's already, whoa, that sounds good, and it's fun to mix. It's not frustrating. So it really depends. That's why it's so much different to mix something that you've recorded, that you've been in control of it from the beginning, than to be handed something like, mix that.
You've inspired me to ask one more question.
Okay.
Could you explain briefly the difference between mixing and mastering, and what the output of the two different processes, how it differs?
Okay, on a technical level, the mixer will go into all the individual tracks and manipulate the tracks, really do EQ, cut, and decision. And it's generally a tone shaping, like it's not uncommon to use modulation into mix, like to create exciting and movement and panning left to right and distortion, just to create excitement in between the tracks. And then the tracks goes together and the master engineer only works on the stereo track, which has all the summing, all the other instruments summed together. So if mixing, in a sense, it's for enhancing and use effects and compression to really enhance the recording, have it to glue together to gel. The mastering process is about fidelity and translation. So the master engineer will make sure that particular recording, that stereo track, will sound competitive with all the rest in the industry currently, and but it will sound good on a boombox. It will sound good in all different series of reproduction systems, like in the car, or in a studio, in a boombox, in a audiophile system. It will make sure they will translate well in every listening situation. And in case the mix is bad, the master engineer might have some more drastic EQ decision to cut. If the mix wasn't done properly, that's too much build up in the high frequency or low frequency or mid frequency, you might use EQ to tame that. But for the most part, it's more about high fidelity, while the mixing can be wild.
So in a nutshell, Gabe said that mixing is where you shape each track so that they fit together like a good puzzle, so that they represent exactly the emotions and the music that you want to come out. And mastering is the process of getting the two final stereo tracks at the right volume and slightly adjusting their EQ so that they have great fidelity on all the different things people like to play them back on, whether it's a big home stereo, or if it's in your car, or if it's on a mobile phone, or a boom box. So that's the end of the discussion for today on recording. I know there's a million more questions, but I hope I covered it thoroughly enough so you feel like you could get involved with somebody and ask the right questions. That's my goal for this. If you have any more questions on the topic, or any topic in any of these podcasts, just write me at beingindie2@gmail.com. That's beingindie, the number 2, @gmail.com. beingindie2@gmail.com. And there is one more topic I want to cover before we part ways, and that is how you protect that stuff that you record and how you get paid for it. So I'm just going to let my friend Tate Sanderson from the Johnny Rock Band answer my questions and see if you can learn anything from it. I wanted to ask you a question about copywriting. How do you copyright your music?
Well, back in the day, I used to copyright it all, like the regular way where you go and pay the government, and you fill out the forms. But since then, if you look online, there's all kinds of companies that aren't even real. I mean, they can do it for you, but they make it look like they're the main place, and they charge you this huge fee, so it's hard to find the right one and pay the right fee for it. But what I found is I publish most of my music through TuneCore, and I've tried a lot of different publishing things online, and that's the only one that I've actually seen profits from. And I have them copyright it and publish it and through BMI. So I get my royalties anytime my videos are played live or not on YouTube. I get a half a cent or something. I mean, everywhere anything's played, anytime they're out there finding it, and they give me little tiny bits of money, which holds up in their thing, and then when it gets big enough, they send it to your bank account right away, so you don't have to deal with it too much.
Say that again. So you use TuneCore.
TuneCore, and right now they've gotten a lot cheaper. It's like $100, or unless you get, I think they might have a discount deal out right now. but so it might be like $50-$60 or something, to where you can pay for a year. As before, I used to pay $50 for an album, and for the album a year. Now it's unlimited, and as many stuff as you want to release in the year. You pay like, less than $100, and it handles your publishing, it handles your copyrights, it handles distribution. If different people are writing it, you can put the splits in there and everything, so who gets what.
Oh, okay.
It's really a good corporation, and I've been with so many, like Reverb Nation will do that for you, and Bandcamp, and there's a lot of DistroKid, a lot of those ones. At one time I had shit on all of them, and the only one really showed me a profit was the TuneCore, and they seem to do more for you too, but the TuneCore thing works the best for me, of legitimately having it all done.
Fantastic.
TuneCore is basically a distributor kind of type thing, right? So when you pay them to put your song out, or album out there, it puts it out to iTunes and Spotify and all these different stores. You could see there's tons of different ones. You can pick different ones you want, or you can just go for the whole shebang, And so it distributes it, but while it's distributed, it copyrights it and publishes it through like BMI, so you get your royalties, and it's all done through them. So it's nice to have everything in one place,
So do they have any publishing rights to your songs?
No, they own nothing. You own it all. They just, I don't know, I'm sure they make something out of it somehow, Yeah, check it out. It's tunecore.com.
Okay.
C-O-R-E, not C-O-R-P.
So I'm going to play one more song. This one's by Johnny Rock. It's called Hot Dog on a Stick, and I'm going to come back in a minute, and I'll tell you my experience with copywriting after talking to Johnny.
Hot dog on a stick, that tasty treat I just can't resist. American or pepper jack, fried cheese on a stick snack. Veggie dogs too, the choice is up to you. Hot dog on a stick, you know you want one. Hot dog on a stick, I want one too. Hot dog on a stick, you know you want one. Hot dog on a stick, I want one too. Corn dogs, cheese dogs, veggie dogs too.
Like Tate, I used to copyright my music in the old way, what he referred to as the old way, where you fill out forms with the U.S. Copyright Office. And it was difficult, and there were many steps. There was always another thing that you had to do to make it happen. And I remember it being very unpleasant, and enough to keep me from wanting to do it, enough for me to understand why bands need managers. I mean, it was arduous. I'd heard of TuneCore before, along with CD Baby and Reverb Nation and Bandcamp and Cloud Bounce and Repost and iMusician. There's a number of different services, like Tate mentioned. They all have different pricing. They all have different services. They claim to all do about the same thing. There's little detailed differences between them. I did research on DistroKid and TuneCore, and decided at the end of the day that I've got so much to do, and my experience with copywriting music in the past was just stupid, and that doesn't include managing my digital rights and actually getting paid for the stuff, as well as getting it uploaded to all these other sites. So I just, out of laziness, out of the need to do other stuff all the time, decided to go with one of these services. And it was, in fact, it was TuneCore. So that's not a recommendation on my part, because I haven't had any results with them yet. But as a matter of fact, I'm not even completely finished signing up. I'll let you know later how it works out.
Hot dog on a stick, you know you want one. Hot dog on a stick.
Well, that's the end of episode 5 of Being Independent. This one was about recording and about copywriting, and we talked a little bit about each. I want to thank Gabriel DeGrazio for being such a wealth of knowledge, and for being so much help to me personally when we were doing our recording at his studio. All the music that I played today was recorded at Amplified Studios, with the exception of the last song by Johnny Rock, who records everything himself. So you got to hear that. And we're going to close out with Johnny Rock now. And I hope you guys come and listen to us again, 6 a.m., 7 p.m. on Fridays. That is Pacific Standard Time. And it's only on Alternative Twist Radio, alternativetwist.com. We'll talk to you next time. I'm Greg Oliver, and Being Independent is out.
I want a corn dog, hot dog on a stick. That tasty treat, you know I just can't resist. American or pepper jack, fried cheese on a stick snack. Veggie dogs too, the choice is up to you. Hot dog.